Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-empowerment. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you and your company stay relevant in an era of rapid change and 10x your results in both your professional and personal life. Each week, I'll bring you corporate innovators, entrepreneurs, authors, keynote speakers, and thought leaders such as Steve Blank, David Allen, Brad Feld, Tim Harford, Karen Dillon, Jenny Blake, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, Pascal Finette, Ryan Blair, and Ash Moria, to name just a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you Fast Fix Friday, some quick, digestible insights to help you end your week on a high as you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub school and consultancy based in Melbourne, Australia and Singapore that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methods and tools to navigate change and survive and thrive in an era of rapid disruption. If your organization needs help coming up with ideas, testing and turning ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. This episode of Future Squared is brought to you by Spigot, the largest provider of innovation management software to some of the world's foremost companies, including the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Westpac, CSIRO, Westfield, AT&T, Citi, Coca-Cola, MetLife Insurance, Pfizer, Sprint, Unilever, and many more. Spigot has powered innovation and process improvement for large enterprises, enabling them to engage with their employees, customers, and partners to build a culture of innovation. Spigot is recognized by both Gartner and Forrester as the leader in the innovation management sector. For a limited time, listeners of Future Squared can get 10% of Spigot's innovation management platform. Taking advantage of this offer is super easy. Simply sign up for a demo at futuresquared.xyz/spigot. That's SPIGIT. And now for today's episode. Welcome back to Future Squared. Today I'm chatting with Omar Zenhom. Omar was previously an educator and university manager for 13 years and attended Wharton Business School, where he dropped out in frustration to build the $100 MBA. The organization is on a mission to revolutionize business education. Omar is the curriculum developer, content creator, and head instructor at the $100 MBA and the podcast of the same name, which now boasts well over 800 episodes. He's also co-founder of Webinar Ninja, which he has scaled from zero to over $2.6 million a year in revenue without raising a single dollar of funding, which I think a lot of startups today can take a lesson from. So here we go. I bring you the one, the only, Omar Zenhom. Welcome to the show, Omar.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the program. And I mean, this is episode number 116 for me, which is just a shadow of the 840 or so episodes on the $100 MBA that you now boast.
Yeah, but I know how hard it is to get to past 100, so congrats for that, Steve.
No, thanks, Omar. So let's get the important stuff out of the way first. I hear you're a fan of 80s music.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, to me, it's the best music, or maybe it's just nostalgia. I don't know.
It's probably nostalgia. It's like when it was the 90s, I was into 80s music and I used to just absolutely despise all of the pop punk stuff like Blink-182. But now when I hear it, it's like, oh, this takes me back to high school. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So any particular 80s artists? Are we talking Duran Duran or are we talking Motley Crue?
I'm a huge
Guns N'
Michael
Roses?
Jackson fan.
Nice.
Love Bruce Springsteen. Whitney Houston, things like, for me, that really, I know, it brings me back to my childhood, but it also, I just feel like those artists had to work harder back then. They created their own music, they wrote their own songs, they had to perform, it was just a different market then. I mean, I think, being like the best-selling album or the best-selling artist was not easy. You didn't have all the marketing channels we have now, and so I just admire those masters in those times.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I was lucky enough to see the Thriller musical over in London's West End last year, and that was absolutely awesome. And as someone who considers himself a devout headbanger, a metalhead, I was absolutely glued to the stage for 3 hours. It was that good. And I think Michael Jackson is just one of those artists that just transcends musical taste. Doesn't matter what you're into. I think everybody appreciates him. Cool, man. So look, I want to get started on MBAs. I mean, I recently shared a quote from Seth Godin that you might be familiar with, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Seth basically said that an MBA today teaches you how to run a business in 1990, takes you out of the real world for 2 years, while everybody else moves forward as quickly as they can. I mean, what's your take on Seth's rhetoric, Omar?
I think he's absolutely right. I mean, and I'm speaking out of experience because in my former life, I was a educator. I taught the high school and university level. I was an administrator. And a lot of people don't know in academia, it's very hard to make changes in the curriculum. A lot of that is because there's a lot of different stakeholders involved. You know, they're external assessment bodies. So, you know, the university has a contract with an external body that creates the assessment, and that contract is for 4 years or for 5 years or sometimes even like 6 or 8 years. You know, they're not going to change the curriculum because they're locked in with that body. So changing the curriculum is going to be a whole lot. You can't just change things on the fly. You can't change textbooks. You can't change the material. So he's absolutely right. Things move very slowly in academia, and there's just too many masters to attend to. So it's not as dynamic as the market is.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, there's so many different stakeholders. Whether it's the school officials, the parents, the teachers, the employers who eventually take these kids on, the universities that they go on to after school. I mean, you've got to align all of these different variables to essentially work together. And most of these different factors, government, for example, can be quite bureaucratic. The school system can be quite bureaucratic. So getting them to change is almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has worked in academia, they know that, you know, there is no place for disruptors. Like, you don't want to be a disruptor. You don't rock the boat. Everybody wants to keep their job. You know, everybody wants to, you know, kind of do the status quo and just follow along and try to do the best job they can given the circumstances. You know, somebody who's trying to change things up, they're going to cost somebody's job. They're going to cost somebody's contract. They're going to cost somebody's salary. So it's really hard to shake things up in academia. It's not to say that, you know, universities are all a waste of time. But, you know, when it comes to what Seth Godin has said, yeah, you know, the market changes drastically. The way business is done now compared to even 5 years ago is completely different. So if you started an MBA or even you minored in business in your bachelor's degree, you know, your first year, you're going to be learning things in your first day, your first semester that is going to be obsolete by the time you graduate.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I think there's numerous stats on this, but anywhere from 40 to say 60% of today's jobs are likely to be replaced, automated, or outsourced in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, these exponentially growing technologies are just moving things so quickly that, like you said, you could do a 2-year MBA, and by the end of that, much of what you learned might become obsolete. And a lot of white-collar roles that were traditionally considered, say, secure, like financial accounting and audit, which is quite boring. I've been there. I worked in that field. So despite the lack of entertainment value, that role will be automated. Those jobs will be automated. So what does this mean for kids today, particularly kids coming up in elementary school or high school? I mean, what do they need to be thinking about to prepare themselves for this imminent change?
Well, that's a good question. I think if you know, it's funny because I just spoke to my nephew who is graduating university in about a couple months, and he was a business major. His specialty was in entrepreneurship, and you know, he's just still new, and it's a great time for him right now. It's a great opportunity for him to discover who he can be and what he can do in the world. But I mean, even if you're in an earlier stage, whether you're in high school or in grade school, you really need to start just learning a little bit more about yourself, have a little bit more self-awareness, because at the end of the day, what you really want to do is you want to flex your strengths. You want to really find out what you're really good at, what unique value can you add to the world is really what you're trying to discover. Because that's what's going to give you a competitive advantage. A lot of people just look at, oh, this makes money. This is what the market needs right now. Let me try to do that. But you may not be a good fit for that. You may not be able to, you know, do well in that area. So what you really need to do is take a look at what can you do well? What are some things that you have, you know, some advantages in? And I'm not talking about talent here, you know, not strictly talent. So like, well, I don't know if I'm talented or smart enough or whatever. It could just be your experience or your background. You know, I always give this very simplistic example, but, you know, somebody who's never traveled, who lives in, you know, who was born and raised in Mississippi and never left Mississippi is not going to make a good travel guide in Egypt, right? That it's just not going to, he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the background. his parents are not Egyptian, whatever. It doesn't work. Now, I have nothing to do with travel, but I just have a competitive advantage because my parents are Egyptian. I speak Arabic. I grew up in an Egyptian household. I've been to Egypt many times. Like, even though I'm not in the travel industry, if I wanted to move into that industry, I would have a leg up because of the experience, the background, my circumstances. So take a look at everything that's at your disposal. Take a look at what you enjoy doing and what comes easy to you, what you're complimented on by your friends and family. Take notice of that and see how you can add value in the world in that way.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on a great point there, Omar, around self-discovery. For so many years, and well, for almost 100 years, the school system has more or less asked us to make a decision at the age of, say, 17, when we're shipping off to university, to say, hey, I want to study financial accounting, or I want to study law, and that's more or less it for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But now the prospect of studying something, becoming that, and doing that for the rest of your life just isn't there. So what's your take on kids that go out and take a gap year, or perhaps just avoid the university route altogether and just go out and try to start a business?
I think that's a great piece of advice I would give anybody who's young. Start a business, or even maybe take a year to travel the world, to get to know the world you want to impact. If you want to make an impact on the world, you got to understand what the world is like. You got to understand different cultures and different languages and different ways of life and different ways of doing business. I really would highly recommend that. And even if that means, taking odd jobs, bussing tables, waiting tables, to get by in that year or two or whatever it is, that's fine. When you're at that age where you have no responsibilities, it's not the time to be conservative. It's time for you to get risky. It's time for you to take, the steps to discover who you are, what you can do, learn about the world. You have no baggage. You have no real responsibilities. Your means is quite affordable. You just need to find a place to sleep and a place to eat, and that's a doable thing on a minimum wage salary. You could do that, or even just even if you're a college grad, you probably can teach English in a foreign language in a foreign country or something like that. But the point is that if you want to start a business, that's a great time for you to do that, because you have very little to lose. I speak to a lot of people who are in their 30s or 40s who want to make a transition in their life after having a career. It's really hard to do that. It's really because they have so much at stake. They have family. They have, not only family in terms of a wife and kids, but or a husband and kids. They also have their parents who are getting older and they need to be by their side. They have responsibilities when it comes to debt and loans and credit cards and mortgages and things that they accumulated since they graduated until they're 35, 40. It's a lot harder to make. They're weighed down, so it's a lot harder to make moves. But when you're young and you have less responsibility, this is the time to take those risks and to go for it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, man. And I think one of the other things that's so compelling for kids these days coming up is that, when we were growing up, starting, say, a technology business 10, 15 years ago, the costs would have been almost prohibitive, if not definitely prohibitive. Whereas today, with cloud computing, ubiquitous internet access, all it takes is an internet connection and a bit of tact, and you can take your message to the world and start testing your ideas.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people underestimate how long it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. First of all, the problem what we have is that a lot of people look at certain, startups or apps or Instagram or whatever it is, and they say, wow, these guys just made it happen within months and da 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 da. Yes and no. It's an edge case. Even those who just blow up in a few months and get sold for billions of dollars, but most entrepreneurs, it takes forever. It takes 20, 30 years to really get good at what you're doing. So you got to allow yourself to figure out what kind of entrepreneur you are, figure out what kind of value you can add to the world, figure out what your strengths are, learn entrepreneurship, learn a profit and loss sheet, learn how to manage people, how to hire, how to fire. All that stuff takes time to learn. I can't just go into an operating room and pretend that I'm a heart surgeon. I need to take the time to learn. I got to go to med school. I got to do my residency. And then even after all that, I'm still nervous. I don't know if, and we're willing to put in 7, 8 years to become, a doctor. But when we want to become a decent entrepreneur, we want it to happen overnight. That's just not feasible. You have to allow yourself to learn and grow and have some failures under your belt. Those are a rite of passage. You got to fail a few times, a whole bunch of times. I failed so many times, and I share that on the show all the time, because you're still learning. Sometimes you'll start a business that is successful. Monetarily, it's successful, but it doesn't really mesh with your lifestyle. It's not really who you want to be. It's not really your legacy. And you realize, oh, this is not sustainable. I got to, switch gears or pivot. And, all these things take time. And I would encourage people to just be a little bit more patient. I have to remind myself, even now, there's certain things that I'm impatient about. I'd be like, hey, gotta take some time, that's why I love reading biographies, autobiographies. This past year I read some really great ones. One that comes to mind right now on this topic is Shoe Dog, the autobiography by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. Mm-hmm. And his company and his own financial well-being was really in jeopardy for over 20 years before they even actually got their big break. And really when they started to take off, when they got some sponsorship and they really got some ways to back some really good athletes. But, it was really teetering on bankruptcy for a very long time, but he kept on moving forward. I mean, how many of us today, young or old, is willing to wait 20 years to get their break? They got to ask that question. So if you're in a situation where you've been kind of in the grind, you've been blogging, you've been trying to put your website together, trying to put your ideas out there, and it's been 6 months, a year, 2 years, that's not bad compared to 20 years, So, I think these reminders are great.
Yeah, definitely. And that whole rags to riches, Phil Knight type of story, it reminds me of Sylvester Stallone's classic story, when he was trying to make it and sell his script for Rocky. He, I think he was doing soft porn, and he ended up selling his dog because he just needed to scrape by. Yeah. And eventually he scored that gig and he bought his dog back, and the rest is history. But it's just such a great story that was his only friend in the world, and he had to sell that dog to make his dream come true, or to just give himself an extra few weeks of runway to hope that his dream would come true. So that's how far deep you've got to dig to really hold on long enough if you're going to make it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think I remember watching an interview of his about that story, and the line that really caught me is when he said, in order to be successful in this world, many times in your life, you have to suspend disbelief. You have to just pretend it's going to work out, because if you don't do that, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to think you're a failure. And, he had all the reasons to fail, like all the reasons to give up. Like he's broke. He's got to sell his dog at a liquor store, and his wife at the time, who unfortunately couldn't hang around because it was just too rough for her. It was like, why don't you just get a job? Just get a job at like Home Depot or whatever. Like it wasn't Home Depot, but whatever. But he was like, why don't you just get a job? And he was like, if I get a job, I'm going to get complacent. And I'll, start paying the things, and I'll just get into the groove, and I won't have that hunger. I need that feeling of I'm starving in order for me to keep going, and that's what I love about that story, where he realizes that, if I don't have that driving force, that's all I have. That's the only thing that's going to keep me going.
Yeah. And, we've touched on a few awesome points there. One is around having good people around you. But before we touch on that, you mentioned, that that kind of censoring disbelief. I think Steve Jobs referred to this as the reality distortion field, where he just believed in something so vehemently that despite society, despite customers, despite employees thinking he wasn't on the right track, he knew that, his vision would come to fruition. And as entrepreneurs, I've been at it for about 5 years now, but in the first couple of years with my first startup, I would often face something called the trough of despair, where you'd be pushing forward, you'd be running lots of experiments, testing assumptions, trying lots of different things. 6 months, 12 months, nothing seems to be going your way, and you just have these days where you just fall into this big emotional black hole, and you're just looking at your friends who you left behind in the corporate world, and they're flying around business class, making good money, all that sort of stuff, and you're thinking, shit, did I make the wrong decision? But somehow a few days pass, and then you're back to your old self, and you're swinging for it again. So I'm keen to hear, what your sort of experience has been coming face to face with that trough. I'm sure you've had them, and
Definitely.
How did you dig yourself out?
Well, first of all, I don't think it ever goes away. I think the bigger your challenges, I go through that now just because I'm upping the ante. My challenges, my goals, what I'm trying to do with the business, expanding, the higher I got to reach, the more difficult it's going to be. The more I'm going to start saying, wow, I've never kind of tried this level. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. All that. So you have to, I always say this, like, in order for you to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to have a firm belief in yourself that you can actually pull this off, that actually you can do the work. There's certain things out of your control, like how the market is going to, actually, react to this, how much of a blockbuster sell will this be, all that stuff. But, you can if you can believe in the fact that you can actually just put your head down, get to work, stay focused, and make it happen, that goes a long way. Secondly, I think that for me, I've learned to train myself that when I get into that situation where it's like, oh, this is just so hard, and I'm just getting kicked while I'm down, and it's really stressful, and whatever, whether money's tight or you need to hire people, and you're trying to upsell so you can be able to afford those hires and all that stuff. I think to myself, this is normal. This is how it goes. Like I mentioned the biographies I've been reading, like, I would read Elon Musk, I would read, Phil Knight, I would read, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I would read all these people, and every single one of them had these difficulties. I would think to myself, hey, I'm like Elon Musk right now. So I know that sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, obviously, he's had tremendous success, but that's just the rite of passage. Like, I can't expect to be successful if I don't have a little bit of pain or a little bit of struggle. Or these struggles are what are going to shape the company. It's what's going to shape me as an entrepreneur, and it's going to be the test that says, hey, do you actually want this? Are you actually going to push through and keep going and make it happen regardless of the challenges? So I often try to remind myself when you're in those down phases to read those biographies, to resonate and feel like, hey, you know what, I'm on the right track. Those guys went through it. Those gals went through it. I can go through it as well. And I can. If I just keep on trying, I'll make it, and the more you go through that cycle, the more you have more confidence, because it's like watching a rerun, like a sitcom. Like, I've seen this show before, like, like I had it, I was in the trough. It was difficult. I was struggling. I pulled through. We launched. We did whatever, and it was fine. And we made money, and the business survived. Then we had the next challenge, and each challenge gets more subtle, more sophisticated. But the more challenges you go through, the more you're like, you know what? This is just par for the course. I've been through this. I just got to do the same thing I did before in order for me to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly right. And it's just like somebody, say, going back to the gym for the first time in 5 years. That first session is going to absolutely kill them. They're going to come home the next day. Their whole body's going to be sore, but they've got to pick themselves up and go again and again and again. And by the, say, 10th, 15th session, mentally they'll be prepared for it, and physically their body will be better at recovering. And it's just the same with entrepreneurship. The more times you fall into that trough of despair, the more you make it your friend, and you just see it as something that's going to strengthen your character rather than take away from it.
Yeah, and just to go along with that analogy, if I get back in shape and I'm in the gym for 6 months, but at the 6 months mark, I don't really put on more weight. I just keep on lifting the same weight. I just keep, I'm just trying to maintain, right? I'm not going to be faced with any challenges, therefore I won't grow. Like, that's just biology, and that's just the nature of even us as growing as entrepreneurs. If I start a business and it's going well and I'm making sales and I'm like, hey, don't rock it, don't change it if it's not broken, or don't try to fix it if it's not broken. It's fine. I don't try to challenge myself or say, hey, what else can I do? How can I add more value to my customers? How can I, improve upon my product or my offering? Those are questions that are going to cause you to have some challenges, because you're going to have to rethink things, you're going to have to reshape things, redo things, and that's going to make you grow. But again, there's going to be some pain in there.
Yeah, definitely. And just finding product market fit doesn't mean that you're going to keep it forever. I mean, the world is moving so quickly that your customers might go somewhere else. I mean, customer appetite today is so fickle. Technology is moving so quickly. You might have a platform that could come along and it might be displaced by a VR version of the platform, or whatever the case may be for your given product. So you just need to constantly be thinking, where is the world going? Where is the puck going? And change. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. Doesn't matter if you're a startup or a big Fortune 500 company. And I guess with so much uncertainty, and you touched on this earlier, and I'm keen to explore it more now, how important is it to have the right people around you, whether that's your girlfriend, your spouse, your team, your friends, and so on?
I've realized it's more and more important as I've grown as an entrepreneur, or just as a person. If I look at the last 5 years of my life, my circle of friends and my circle of professional contacts have really kind of slimmed down, and because I'm being more conscious of it, because what you realize very quickly is that time is so valuable. Like your time, we all have just 24 hours a day. whatever our lifespan is going to be, that's the time we have allotted in this world. And if you got to value every minute, every hour. And if you're hanging around people that are just not going to help you as a person or as an entrepreneur, you're really making life a lot more difficult for yourself. It's going to make the challenge even harder. I think definitely when it comes to your personal life, when it comes to your significant other, whether it's your spouse or your partner in life or whatever it is, I think that has the greatest impact, because you need that support. You need somebody to have your back. You need somebody who actually, even if they don't fully understand what you're doing, they need to be there to encourage you when you're down, to pick you up when you're down, to make you really believe in what you're doing. So that's really important. So that's a big struggle for a lot of people. They feel like maybe they're in a different space in their head in terms of their spouse. Their spouse and them are in a different place, or their partner in life is in a different space. And I always say to them, your first job, especially when you make that transition to say, okay, I'm going to try to build something for myself, is that you have to sell it to yourself, first of all, but sell it to the people around you, sell it to your partner, because you have to tell them, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I really believe in. This is my plan of action. This is how I'm going to do it, in terms of finances, or in terms of, a difference of lifestyle. That might mean, hey guys, we're going to have to downsize our house, or we're going to, hey family, have a family meeting and sit there and say, hey, we're going to have to sell the car and downgrade, or whatever it is. This is the real world. This is reality. And you have to do that. You can't just avoid that. You have to just confront the situation. And if you can't sell it to them, you're not gonna be able to sell it to strangers. So you got to be able to sell the idea, the concept, the vision to them. You got to get them on board. If they're not on board, you're gonna have problems all throughout the way. You're gonna have resentment, and you're gonna have an emotional mess. So that's job number one. Make sure that the people that are in your household, the people that you see most of the time, are on board. Even if they don't fully understand, they need to be like, okay, I get it. This is something you got to do. I'm with you. Let's make it happen. When it comes to your circle of influence in terms of friends, or in terms of business partners, or business colleagues, or even your employees, 100%. I mean, you can't build anything by yourself that has some huge significance. Obviously you can start off by yourself as a solopreneur and maybe hire a VA, and that's great. That's a good way for you to get started. But eventually you're going to have to hire somebody else, or you're going to have to partner up with somebody, because you just can't do everything. You can't be an expert at everything, right? And you have to have people with the right attitude. You have to have the people with the right. They're on board with what you're trying to do. They understand what you're trying to achieve, the vision of what you're trying to build. That has to be really transparent. I mean, I think about everybody who's on our team, and I think that everybody gets hired for their skills, but often they're fired for their attitude. That's really what breaks a relationship in business, is that they're just not on board in terms of their attitude, and you can't train that. I can't train attitude. I can't train people to be into it or to buy into the vision. Either they're in or they're out, and that's just something that you have to make sure that is 100% with your employees, with your partners, and even people that are working with you temporarily, whether they're like joint venture partners or affiliates or whatever they are. So just be mindful of that. And also, if you want to grow, you're going to have to find people that are going to push you to grow. They're going to be honest with you, that are maybe at a different level than you are, and you aspire to being with them. So try to surround yourself with people that push you to be a little bit better, that are going to give you the truth and tell you, hey, I think you should be dedicating more time doing this or that. So those have been helpful and healthy for me in the last few years.
And on relationships, I draw parallels between what you said and a lot of corporate innovation initiatives, where a bit of money will be set aside to, say, run a corporate accelerator, and then senior management or the C-suite will basically say, hey, where's the ROI? I've been running this thing for 4 months and there's no dollars being generated, and ultimately the projects get canned, and that's the end of that. And it's just like being in a relationship with someone who just doesn't see what you're trying to do and doesn't want to come along for that journey, which may take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years in some cases, or even more, to find that product market fit, or to just become a sustainable entrepreneur.
And you also have to be compassionate to that person. Like, you have to understand that it's hard, because their partner in life is changing. Like, they didn't sign up for this, like you were somebody in an office that was coming home, bringing home the bacon, and that's what they married or they got involved with. Now you're flipping the script on them. They're saying, hey, that's not who I'm going to be anymore. I'm going to be something different. I'm going to be doing something different. And you might say, well, I'm the same person, but you are what you do. You are what you do consistently. So you have to understand that this is a change for them as well. And you have to be a little bit more understanding with that. And you have to kind of convince them or talk them through it. And it's not just one talk, it's many talks. It's also just bring them along with the journey, talking about it. It's okay to share maybe some decisions that you're thinking about making with them and seeing what they think. Get them involved. So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, guys, I'm going to be an entrepreneur now. I'm quitting my job. Live with it. Like that's not you can't do that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that applies to anything. Whenever you're trying to get buy-in for whatever it is, I mean, you need to involve people. Otherwise, they'll just feel dictated to. They won't feel like part of the conversation, and ultimately, you won't get the support that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So on self-discovery, Omar, I mean, you mentioned your nephew and how you said, he should be out there discovering who he is, what his strengths are, and so on. And like you said, you spent 13 years as an educator and as a university manager. I mean, keen to explore what your transition looked like from being an educator, which you still are, but not in the traditional sense, from what you were doing to the $100 MBA. At what point did you say, okay, I've had enough? I know you dropped out of Wharton Business School because you were just frustrated with the whole system. So keen to explore that transition from Omar version 1 to Omar version 2, although I'm sure if you were to be serious, if you were to be honest, you're probably up to like Omar version 99.3.
Yeah, when I look back at it, the more I look back at that transition, I often think how much was that transition influenced by my upbringing. My parents, immigrated from Egypt to the States in 47.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, in 67. And, I was born and raised in the States. And if you grow up with immigrant parents, they don't mess around. Like they didn't come to America and learn a new language and learn a new place and just leave everybody and everything they knew behind so I can mess around in school or mess around in life. You got to take everything seriously. Expectations are high, and I appreciate that. And that really has helped me even today as an adult. Like I have, great examples as parents who really worked hard, who really sacrificed, who came with nothing and made a great life for us, which a lot of us don't, some of us we underestimate. So, I mean, when I actually made that transition, it was funny because at the time I was a middle manager at the university I was working at. I was the head of department of what's called the foundations department, which is like the entry level year of the kids at the university. Mm-hmm. And I was actually trying to get a position that's a little bit higher, which is a chair position. And I've been trying to get this position for years. And in fact, that position was empty for a year, and I was taking on all those responsibilities for that year because no one was doing it. And I was the person right under, I was the head of department below there, and I had to take on those responsibilities. So I was like, okay, this should be a shoo-in, right? But they just never promoted me. They just never gave me that position. And and mind you, like I was really good at my job. I worked really hard. I had, great results. Our team was, top team in the whole system. I mean, I worked at, quite a large university. And the thing was just that I was starting to get frustrated because, about 10 years during my time as an educator, I was dabbling into entrepreneurship. I was side hustling. I was building side businesses. I was getting a little bit more confidence as each year went by. And at this point, when I was at that university in this whole situation with that position, I was pretty confident that if I switched gears, I can make something out of it. If I just put half the effort I put in my job into my businesses. But I still was an achiever. I still wanted this position because I thought I deserved it. So I went to my my supervisor at that time, and I just went to her office and I said, hey, listen, I need to have an honest conversation with you. This position's been open for a year. I've been doing it for a year. I really love this position. Am I going to get this position? What's going on? And she gave me an honest answer, which I really appreciate to this day that she gave me that answer because it was a catalyst for me. And she just said, hey, Omar, I understand where you're coming from, but unfortunately, the director of the university wants to make an external hire for this position. And at this point, I don't know why it was this moment where it was like the dime just dropped and everything just, okay, all right, this is weird, because I'm like, I realize I have no control over my achievement in my position. I was like, yeah, sure, I can leave the university and get another job somewhere else. Yeah, I can do whatever, but I thought to myself, if I resign this moment right now, what do I have to take for me? I can't take anything with me. Everything I've done is for the university. All the policies I've created are going to stay with the university. All the change, all the effects I've done, I can't take with me. The best thing I'll probably get like a wallet as a parting gift, whatever. That's, and that's, I realized that, wow, I'm building somebody else's legacy here. I'm building somebody's entity. And I just thought, this is, I mean, to be quite frank, I was like, this is bullcrap. Like, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing? And I just thought to myself, you know what? I got to go for this. I got to do my own thing because it's now or never. I'm not getting any younger. I was like 30 at the time, and I was like, I'm not getting any younger. I got to try it. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to education. And I kind of said that to myself, but I really knew there was no plan B. I just really needed to make a break for it. So I resigned, and it was a bit shocking because they're like, why are you resigning? You're doing great and you have a great position and you've moved up and whatever. And I was just like, no, that was just all I needed to hear to know that, I won't be in control if I stay.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, on that conversation being a catalyst for change, it sparks my memory when we hired one of my good friends who I worked with previously at Ernst & Young. His catalyst for change was a conversation he had over the water cooler on a Tuesday where one of his colleagues basically said, hey, it's only 4 days till Friday, in response to, hey, how's it going? So, that mentality he thought, okay, this is not good. I've got to get out of here if this is the mentality that people have in these types of organizations. So, I mean, it speaks volumes also about your mindset. I think a lot of people, when they hear those words, either they'll become disgruntled, cower back into a hole and just do really shitty work. They might look for a job elsewhere where, again, they'll probably just fall into the same type of bureaucracy. Or three, they'll say, okay, stuff this, I'm going to go out and do my own thing or take this into my own hands. So, I mean, to that point, you started talking about that when you mentioned being an immigrant, and I can totally relate to that. My parents moved out from Eastern Europe, a small country called Macedonia, back in 1970. And I guess there is this hunger for more. And maybe it's just because they came to, in my case, Australia with absolutely nothing but an empty suitcase, but worked their fingers to the bone to provide a life and provide an opportunity for me and my sister. So do you think that in general, immigrant children make better entrepreneurs, or is that a generalization?
That's a good question. Obviously, there's no 100% rule of thumb, but I do think they have an advantage. I think that as an immigrant, you have an example, like as children of immigrants, we have an example of looking at our parents who changed their whole life, moved completely to the other side of the world so they can seek opportunity. So you have an example of somebody in front of you showing you that you have to always seek opportunities, right? And for me, if that's just in your blood or in front of you growing up all the time, that you see your parents, it's so subtle. Like I see, like, for example, when my parents moved to America from Egypt, they didn't know anybody. They didn't know anybody. No family, no friends, no nothing. They had to make friends. They had to understand a new language. They had to learn how to read and write and get jobs and all that stuff. And the problem is that they were professionals. With my father was a highly respected engineer in Egypt. My mom was a dietitian, and they had to redo all their certification and their studies in the States because they didn't recognize their certificates from Egypt. I mean, who's willing to do that? All because they say, oh, there's opportunity in this country. Let's seek these opportunities out. Let's do the work. It's worth it. So when you see that growing up as a child, you realize that life is not a breeze. Life is, if you want something, you got to work for it. If you want something, you have to go after it. If you see an opportunity, you don't just give up in the middle. You just say, hey, what do I got to do this? I wrote a blog post one time about some of the things that my mother went through when she came to America, because for me, she's a great inspiration. She didn't come with much money. She realized that she couldn't be a dietitian, in America with her certificate. So she had to redo her bachelor's degree and do it all over again. But she has no money. How is she going to go to school? So she worked days and nights and then went to school, distance learning so she could do this, spending nothing on herself for years. Right? For years doing this, how many of us are able to not spend something on ourselves, whether it's Netflix or a new shirt or a pair of shoes or whatever it is, things that, are pretty basic needs, but she didn't do that for years, so she can get that certificate, and she still doesn't have the job yet. She has to apply for jobs. She's, at the time she's speaking with an accent, she learned the language very quickly. She's a respected professional, but in the meantime, this whole time she's taken odd jobs. She was an elevator operator. She didn't have any pride in doing that. She's just like, hey, I have a vision. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to make it happen. Right. So even when she got her certificate, she's trying to get a job. The first place that she could actually get a position was a mental institution. And I mean, if you've ever been to it's quite scary. There's people screaming. It's very traumatic. My mother's like, I don't know if I could do this, but she's like, I got to get my foot in the door in this profession. I'm going to take this job on. And she did. And she learned to work with the patients and set their diets and things like that. So when you see that in front of you growing up, and you see your mother coming home from work every day, and you see your father coming home every day and telling you these stories and sharing their struggle, understanding that, like you got to be wise with money and all that stuff, that's going to affect you. You can't just pretend that didn't happen. So when you're doing your own life, you're living your own life, making your own decisions, you realize how, first of all, fortunate you are. You live in this time that things are a lot more a lot easier, but also that, if you're struggling, that's normal. That's, you've seen that in your life so many times that you understand that that's what adults do when they want to get something done.
Love it, man. Love it. And on coming to the country and not knowing the language, I can't forget a story my mum told me. When she moved to Australia, within the first 2 weeks, she visited the grocery store, and she used to carry around with her a little notepad because she knew absolutely no English, and she would draw things like an egg on the notepad and show that to one of the attendants, and they'd show her where the eggs were because she had no idea how to say it. And back then, you did not have Google Translate or anything. And so just a funny story, what the kind of stuff they had to struggle with to move to a new country where you knew no one, where you didn't know the language, where you didn't have any money or any certifications to actually get a decent gig. And they went through all that for us. So for us, it's now an opportunity to go out and do amazing things in the world. And to that point, I wanted to touch on the $100 MBA. I mean, we've been talking about tertiary education, we've been talking about secondary school and so on, and some of the, I suppose, pitfalls associated with that, some of the shortcomings, and the multi-stakeholder approach, and how it means that change is very, very, very slow if there is change at all. So that prompted you to start the $100 MBA. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a $100 MBA education. So we tried to distill the most practical and important aspects of an MBA, whether it's marketing, finance, sales, idea validation, these types of fundamentals, into our course. And it's a self-serve course where we have over 180 training videos, highly produced videos that are really geared to get you to go and experiment and take these practices, take what you're learning and practice them in real life and in the real world. So we started the $100 MBA program in October of 2013, and it was really a lot of fun because I just got to connect with people that were in the same space I was trying to make a transition into their life, trying to learn the fundamentals of business so they can start their own thing on their own time, and whether it's a side hustle or full time. And then later in 2014, in August of 2014, we launched the podcast, the $100 MBA Show, which we thought would be a great way to teach daily lessons, every day teach a lesson, so people can have something to digest. They're only 10-minute lessons, so they can learn a specific topic in business, whether it's marketing or sales or how to set prices for your products or things like that, and they can move on and take a new lesson every day. And it was a great way not only to reach a new audience, but also create some sort of awareness of what we do at the $100 MBA program as well. And that was one of my favorite projects I ever worked on. It's been one of the biggest successes we've had, that show. We're happy to say that, after our launch, it was a big success. In 2014, in December, we won Best of iTunes, which really helped us gain a lot of recognition in the podcasting world and through Apple as well. And to this day now, we get a little over 50,000 daily downloads for each episode, which means we're growing, we're reaching new people. And it's just a great free way for people to get their foot in the door and learn about business and learn that this is not rocket science. Anybody can really do this if they're committed and they have the dedication to learn what they have to learn.
Yeah, and persistence above all else. You've got to persist. Every morning we have these team stand-ups and we share a random word of wisdom. And yesterday's was something about a river doesn't penetrate a rock by its power; it penetrates it via its persistence.
I love it.
And that's just so true of entrepreneurship. And I mean, speaking of the podcast, persistence. 840 plus episodes. You've been going now for almost 3 years, 50,000 daily downloads, which is something like 1.5 million a month if we extrapolate that out to 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've had a number of people on the show, I suppose, giving guest lessons. So keen to find out who's been perhaps one of the most memorable guests and what did they share?
Oh, there's so many great ones.
Yeah.
And some of them were big names, some of them were not so big. We had Chris Levine, who does all the marketing videos for Wistia, and he did a really innovative lesson on how to create great marketing videos. And the edit was fantastic, and it's just a lot of fun. Noah Kagan from Sumo.com talked about building lists, and his was very honest and real. Jordan Harbinger from The Art of Charm did a great lesson on how to build a network and how to stay in touch with people and build real relationships in business so that you can call upon them not only when you need help, but also when you can help them. Top of mind, those are ones. Michael Port, public speaking, fantastic public speaker and trainer, gave a couple lessons on, performance on stage, or whether it's on a webinar or whether it's on a podcast. Really, he's my, I go to him for training when it comes to public speaking, and it was just a great honor for him to be on the show and teach that lesson. So, great variety. We had some really amazing women too on the show. Dory Clark is fantastic, teaching how to stand out in a marketplace, in a busy marketplace. A lot of fun.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, it's something I'm also, I consider myself blessed to be able to connect with so many people. Just a couple of weeks ago, I chatted with Alec Ross, who was Hillary Clinton's advisor of innovation. No, he did not hack her email, but him amongst so many other names has just been so exciting. And I think that's also something that people have the opportunity to do these days, is to potentially start a podcast or a blog or get onto social and slowly over time build up their brands, build up that rapport with people, and connect with amazing people from all over the world. You can do that today. It's a lot easier than what it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago, when I remember being like I said, a heavy metal fan. We used to trade tapes. We used to actually, send tapes via the postal system to countries and cities around the world, and that's how we'd find out about bands and stuff. Whereas now, obviously, Spotify, and there's thousands and tens of thousands of artists. So it's a totally different time. And one other thing I wanted to touch on, Omar, before we jump into the lightning round, was Webinar Ninja, which you are the co-founder of. Yep. At last count, and this was the last stat that I could find, you guys were making 2.6 million a year, but I'm sure it's more than that now. But what really fascinated me about that, and this is something that I'm a big believer of too, is that you've not taken any funding.
Yeah.
So many startups today, every pitch night I go to, it's like, oh yeah, we need $1 million to do this, this, and this. And it's like, you guys haven't got traction yet. You've got like one customer giving you $10 a month. What makes you think that your valuation is, $4 million or more? It's absolutely crazy. So, I mean, firstly, congrats on doing so well with Webinar Ninja. But I mean, what's your take on the whole sort of funding appetite that startups have these days?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, unfortunately, I mean, there's a wide spectrum. I think a lot of people on one side of the spectrum, they're coming from the camp where, like, I have this great idea, and if I can just get it funded, I can make it happen. And for me, businesses are not about ideas. Yeah. Like Facebook is not successful because of the idea. There was MySpace before, right? The reason why Facebook is successful is because of its implementation, how they implemented the idea, right? So if you can't prove you can implement, then there's no reason for me to fund your business, because I can give you money, but if you don't actually bring it to life the way it should bring it to life, then you're really wasting my money. So what you really, I believe you should never ask for funding at the start. You should at least have a real business with real customers in a live environment. And if at that point, after you have some critical mass where you can actually prove and predict revenue and say, okay, we have 1,000 users, or we have 5,000 users, and they're paying X amount of dollars every month, and these are our costs, and this we need an injection, or we need some angel investment, or we need, or an investor or a partner to come on board and take profit share. Fine, I can understand when somebody wants to kind of do that. But again, I would say you don't need to do that, right? You have to ask yourself, why are you asking for money? If you are profitable right now, if you've implemented the idea, you're running your business, you have live customers, and you're profitable, why are you asking for money? The reason why you're asking for money is probably because you want to grow faster, right? And a lot of people think that growing fast is like the thing you have to do. No, it's actually very detrimental in a lot of ways. And a lot of companies do a lot of work to make sure they don't grow fast, because growing fast means you're doing a lot of things at haste. You're hiring hastily. You're choosing the wrong people to be part of your team. You're making very rushed decisions. You're not really allowing the market to tell you what your product needs to be. So growing slowly really helps in that process. And this is my own experience with Webinar Ninjas, growing slowly, using our own profits to fund our business and to keep on innovating and growing and changing. And that's something that I've learned. And a lot of things, people don't really do their homework. Like, there's a lot of incredible companies that are completely privately owned, no funding whatsoever. Sarah Blakely from Spanx, $1 billion company, completely 100% ownership, never took funding, right? You have people like Zumba, completely, they're bigger than radio stations. I mean, Pitbull and Shakira are like, hey, play my albums in your classes. Multi-million-dollar business, completely self-funded. People like Patagonia clothing. This is retail. Retail needs money. Completely self-funded. They purposely didn't grow fast and said, we're going to go within a 30-year period and try to grow as slowly as possible in these 30 years, because we want to keep the same culture in our company. We want to have the right people on board. We want to treat our employees right. We have the right policies, whether it's maternity leave or whatever it is, and we don't want the funding or the money or the hunger to grow to dictate our culture, right? So, and completely private, 100% owned by the founder. Multi-million-dollar company makes over $1 billion in revenue in a year. So it's like, you got to think, this is not like rocket. Like, I don't want to say rocket science, but it's not impossible. This is done before. People have done this over and over again. It's just that you have to be real with yourself. Why are you asking for money? And most of the time, the answer is, I'm impatient. I don't want to grind it out. I don't want to grow this thing myself. I don't want to actually. I want to just hire a whole bunch of people and just live in the Bahamas, whatever. No, that's not how businesses actually get built and have longevity and really have a lifespan that will sustain this. When you grow slowly, you can really analyze what's going wrong, what's going right, how to pivot, how to change with the market. I was just listening to an interview with the founders of Lyft, the competitor of Uber, and these guys are completely aware of how to grow. They're like, we're trying to grow as rapidly as possible, but at the same time, we understand there's changes on the horizon, automation, things like that. We need to think about these things and be able to change with it. So money is not going to solve all your problems. What's really your problem, the thing you really need to solve is, can I actually produce a business, a product, an offering that is profitable, that actually people want, that will pay for money, enough people to pay for it, so it's profitable, right? Can I actually produce this? If the answer is yes, do it. You have to do it. You can't just say, hey, I think it's going to happen. Do it, actually build it, make it happen. And if it manifests and you want to, have an injection of cash, that's something that you can think about and discuss, but you don't have to do it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I mean, funding can be a blessing or a curse depending on which stage of the product development and life cycle you get it, I guess. I mean, if you get it too early, you might see that funding as some sort of form of as a form of market validation. And like you said, you're just going to go out and hire people that you don't even need and spend it on marketing campaigns that you may as well just go down to the casino and put that money on black. Whereas if you don't have as much money to play with, you're going to spend more time optimizing. You're going to spend more time learning from the market and more time essentially finding that unique value proposition that people are saying, hey, take my money. I really need your product. It's solving such a big problem for me. But unless you do the homework, unless you really dig deep to figure out what that is, all the money in the world isn't going to work unless your implementation and execution is on point.
Exactly. And I think that also what I've learned by growing, slowly or at a comfortable pace, that keeps us self-funded is also that, you get to have a taste of every position you're hiring for. If you don't get a chance to actually do the job that you're hiring for, you don't know what to hire for. How are you going to write a job description if you don't know what you're hiring for? So we have a team of a little over 22 people now, 22 people. It's not a huge team, but we have, every single position, I pretty much did their job. I've answered customer service tickets, before I hired our first customer service agent. I sat there and plowed through 300, customer service emails in one day. And I know how long it takes to answer a ticket. So when I hire somebody and they say, "Oh, I only did X amount of tickets today," I'd be like, you're being lazy, or you need to speed that up, or what's going on? Maybe you need to be retrained, because I did it myself and I know how long it takes, right? So by growing slowly, you can have those opportunities, and you know how to hire people properly. Right. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to this. I'm not a front-end developer or a back-end developer, but I know a little bit of code. I took some courses. I'm a little bit self-taught. I know how to read code. You need to kind of orient yourself with at least a little bit about every position you're hiring for. I did all the marketing before. Now we have some help with marketing. So I can kind of take a look and have an intelligent conversation with this person that we hired about that position and about their work. So if you're just saying, "Hey, I got an idea, I got some funding, I'm going to just hire a bunch of people," how do you know they're doing the job properly if you don't know the job?
Exactly. Couldn't agree more, Omar. Okay, well, we've got 4 minutes left, so it's time to jump into our lightning round. You ready to rock and roll?
Ready.
Let's do this. So question number 1 is, if you could work for any company at any stage of the company lifecycle, who would it be and why?
My company.
Your company? Love that answer. Spoken like a true entrepreneur. Question number 2 is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask? And you can't say yourself.
Oh. I'd probably Muhammad Ali. I probably would love to have a conversation with Muhammad Ali, and just it would be a whole bunch of questions about his whole journey of greatness, and being such an incredible athlete, being an incredible inspiration for people in social movements, and probably talk about the decision he made not to go to war and how hard that was, and why, what was that kind of moment like, when he said, "Okay, I'm going to give up my title and possibly go to jail because of standing up for what I believe in."
Well, yeah, he was standing up for something much, much bigger than himself.
Yep.
And finally, Omar, question number 3 is, do you have any rituals or routines to help you stay on top of your game?
Yes, I definitely love to separate planning from implementation. So either the night before or at times in the morning of, when I start the morning after I have breakfast, I like to sit down away from the office, so either in the backyard or in the living room or something, with paper and pen, and completely flesh out what I have to do today or have to do tomorrow, whatever, or even just the whole week. And it's a little bit of a detailed to-do list. And I do this because I really believe that it's a lot easier to get to work when all the planning is done, and I just have the list in front of me, and I just go into worker bee mode and just work, and go through, and I don't have to make any decisions because all the decisions were made in the morning or the night before when I made that list. Yeah,
I love that. I like to make a list at the end of my workday, so that my subconscious starts working on this, and then the next morning I come in and it's like, boom, you're just straight at it. You don't have to think about what you're going to do today. Your brain's already kind of been thinking about it for you.
Yeah.
And awesome, man. So people can find you they can check out the $100 MBA at 100mba.net. They can find you on Twitter at the Omar Zenhom, and that's Zenhom. They can check out Webinar Ninja at webinarninja.co, and your podcast, the $100 MBA, is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and I imagine all other good podcast platforms. So is there anywhere else people should go to connect with you, Omar?
I think that's all good. I think if anybody, if you go to any of those websites, they can subscribe to the podcast. They can sign up for free courses on Webinar Ninja or the $100 MBA, and you'll be part of our mailing list. And if you ever, reply to those emails, I will reply. It may take a day or two, but I like to reply personally to everybody who replies to our emails.
Love it. Well, thanks, Omar. You've dropped a lot of value bombs for our audience. Any parting words of wisdom?
The only thing I can think of is what I say to people when they're struggling or when they're looking for advice is stop questioning yourself. Stop asking if you can or can't do it. Just get busy doing. When you're too busy to work, too busy, you don't have time to think about can or cannot do something, and you're all this self-doubt. Self-doubt is a killer. So just try to keep busy and keep moving forward.
Love it. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Steve again. If you're picking up what we're putting down, we'd love it if you took just a minute of your time to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. It would mean a hell of a lot to the team here who work effortlessly to bring you thought leaders and experts on topics of corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement on a weekly basis. As always, you can find more resources on innovation, including blogs, books, podcasts, videos, webinars, and tools at www.collectivecamp.us. If you'd like to connect with me on Twitter, you can do so at Steve Glaveski. That's Glaveski. Until next time, keep innovating. Future Squared out.